There are little things that can happen sometimes which, though seemingly insignificant on their own, still so perfectly exemplify a larger issue that they're worth more attention than we might otherwise tend to afford them. That, I think, is the case with this recent tweet from the ACLU. Now, as you may know, there was a time many moons ago when the American Civil Liberties Union concerned itself with defending civil liberties. It was once so committed to the First Amendment that it defended the speech and assembly rights of the KKK and Nazis. That's when it took the C and L part of the name seriously, but those days have been over for a long time. Now the C and L may as well stand for, communist lunatics or crazy leftists or whatever you want to put in there. They are nothing but a group of far-left agitators at this point, often positioning themselves further out on the leftist fringe than even the most fringe leftists have. And that brings us to the tweet, posted in honor of the anniversary of RBG's death a few days ago. In the caption, they write, "With Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, we lost a champion for abortion and gender equality. And on the anniversary of her death, the fight to protect abortion access is more urgent than ever." So far, so normal. But then, in an image below the caption, they include a quote from RBG herself. The original quote, the one that their version is based on, says, this is quoting RBG now, "The decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a woman's life, to her well-being and dignity. When government controls the decision for her, she is being treated as less than a fully adult human responsible for her own choices." Again, pretty normal. I mean, we're leaving aside for now the problems with the original quote itself. Of course, a woman makes the decision to potentially bear a child when she engages in the sexual act. The sexual act is the reproductive act. So even if you don't intend to reproduce, you're still engaging in the reproductive act, which can have that consequence and has had that consequence literally billions of times in human history. Once conception occurs, whether she intended it or not, she is now bearing a child. She cannot preserve her dignity by going to the abortionist and paying hundreds of dollars to have that baby killed. And in fact, by expecting a mother to care for her children rather than murder them, we are indeed treating her like a fully adult human. That's what we expect adults to do. You treat a woman as less than an adult and even less than human when you propose that she may need to murder her own kids for the sake of her own well-being. The point is, there are many problems with the quote from RBG, but the quote is the quote. I mean, she said what she said. I could disagree with what she said, but I can't change the fact that she said it. On that point, the ACLU begs to differ. In their version of the quote, posted to Twitter, in honor of RBG and to commemorate the anniversary of her death, the organization gives us this. This is the quote that they have. "The decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a person's life, to their well-being and dignity. When the government controls that decision for people, they are being treated as less than a fully adult human responsible for their own choices." Yes, the ACLU removed the word woman from Ruth Bader Ginsburg's quote about women. It's hard to know where to begin in surveying all the problems with a move like this. So let's just start with a basic point about quotes. Namely, that this is not how quotes work. You cannot alter the words in a quote to change the meaning or update the content. The ACLU takes woman and her, and they take that out and they sub in people and they put that in brackets. Okay, but you don't get away with it by putting in brackets because that's not how brackets work either. Brackets are used to clarify someone's meaning or to add necessary details. For example, if I were to say, just as an example, Lamar Jackson is a better playmaker than Patrick Mahomes, you could repeat that quote accurately and validly by saying, Matt Walsh said, quote, brackets, Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson is a better playmaker than, brackets, Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes. That would clarify my meaning and provide necessary information to people who may not be familiar with the names that I used. You're adding words in, but in a clarifying way. But if you objected to the content of my statement, it would not be valid to say, Matt Walsh said, quote, Lamar Jackson is, brackets, not a better playmaker than Patrick Mahomes. That may be what you think I ought to have said, but it's not what I said. So it would not be true to say that I said it. That's English 101, I guess. English 101 lesson. If we can move past that, the greater point is that the ACLU has just perfectly demonstrated how left-wing gender theory totally undermines and negates the feminist argument for women's rights. After all, you can't have women's rights if you don't have women. The irony is that in their caption of the altered quote, they credit RBG with advancing gender equality, and then they proceed in the very next step to erase gender entirely. Just imagine for a second how every standard feminist talking point will sound once you sub the words people or person for women or woman. This is actually kind of fun. It's a fun game you could play on your own. I'll get you started. For example, here's a claim you've heard a million times. Women earn 82 cents for every dollar men earn. Now, that's not at all true, but that's not the point. Let's consider the claim again with the ACLU's edits. People earn 82 cents for every dollar people earn. Suddenly, a political talking point that was coherent yet false becomes incoherent, redundant, and still false. Or try another statement that you've heard many times, or you've heard something to this effect many times. We must defeat male privilege so that men and women are finally equal. That now becomes, we must defeat people privilege so that people and people are finally equal. And so on. As I said, every feminist talking point, every single one, is reduced to ash and rubble by this change. In fact, just last night, Nikki Fried, who's that silly woman down in Florida who's running for governor, she tweeted simply, elect women. Like I said, a silly person. But this now becomes, as dumb as that is, well, just elect women. Yeah, just elect women. But now that becomes elect people. And I mean, that at least makes some kind of sense, I guess. Hopefully we all agree that we should be electing people and not, say, snakes and rodents. Though Congress would seem to suggest that we don't all agree on that point. Either way, it's impossible to advocate for electing women if there is apparently no such thing. Now, another point I think has to be made here. Many people on the right, when they see this sort of thing play out, they're inclined to sit back, grab a popcorn and a soda, and watch the left eat itself. The belief, the hope, the quite fanciful hope, I think, is that the left will self-destruct under the weight of its own contradictions. Many of us expect that there will be some sort of war of attrition between the conflicting factions, and in the end, they'll all be destroyed, right? The trans activists who wish to erase women, the feminists who wishes to elevate women above men, both of these sides cannot coexist, much less achieve any kind of mutual victory, we think. So let them fight, and we will win by default. This is the attitude of many on the right. And I understand it. I understand that attitude. It's an optimistic attitude. It's wrong for two reasons. First, this assumes that the left notices these contradictions and is bothered by them. It assumes that they feel the need to be consistent or coherent. They don't. One of the marks of a tyrant, one of the things that makes them a tyrant, and modern American leftism is a tyrannical movement. One of the marks of a tyrant is that he is arbitrary and inconsistent, and you are expected to cooperate with and affirm his whims in any given moment. This is a feature, not a bug. It's part of the point. Especially for relativists who deny that there is any sort of objective or knowable truth. The truth changes on a dime, sometimes from one sentence to the next, which is how the ACLU celebrates gender equality in one sentence, and in the very next sentence denies the existence of gender. This is all a part of the tyrannical relativist game. Second thing, and this is where it gets even more depressing. If there is a conflict between what we might call traditional left-wing feminists, they're so old-fashioned and traditional that they believe that, only women have uteruses. But if there's a conflict between them and the trans agenda, and if it's true that either side must achieve a zero-sum victory, then the trans agenda will triumph. Arguably, they already have. They hold all of the cultural power right now and have already used it to enact sweeping, catastrophic, previously unimaginable changes. And they've been able to do this in an incredibly short amount of time. They have totally altered the way that even average people on the street view biological sex. The philosopher, I think it was Charles Taylor, has this concept called the social imaginary. And that has to do with the way, you have the academics with their theories and average people on the street who really aren't aware of those theories and aren't participating in those conversations in the ivory towers. Well, the social imaginary is when those theories filter their way down into society and becomes part of the sort of intuitive sense that it becomes this intuitive sense that everybody shares. When people in society start believing something seemingly intuitively without even knowing why they believe it. And so these ideas about gender from the left, they become part of the social imaginary. Average people buy into this stuff without knowing why they buy into it, without knowing where it comes from, without being able to explain it. But the point is that the trans activists have been able to inject this stuff into the social imaginary to craft and mold the social imaginary in a very short amount of time. What does that mean? It means that they're going to win that fight with the feminists. And though it may be briefly satisfying to watch all of those feminist Medusas suffer such a humiliating fate, and I don't deny that it is satisfying to watch, the reality is that the victors will be significantly worse. In fact, it's not so much that feminists would be supplanted by trans advocates, but that they would be passing the baton, even if unwillingly. It would represent a transition, much like, stage 3 cancer transitions to stage 4. The great project of left-wing feminism was to undermine and destroy, at least in the societal consciousness, moral truth and certain biological truths. As we move to stage 4 and our cultural cancer becomes terminal, the modern gender warriors take us from the rejection of moral truth and certain biological truths to the rejection of truth itself and biology itself. That is the shift that we are all now witnessing. And suddenly it becomes not quite as funny when you look at it like that. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends.